Ever want to shock a finance bro? We know they like to talk down to everyone around them, so why not blow the top off their dome with some insider finance tips? Bonus, they get to be put in their place by a woman. So next time you're around one of these egomaniacs, say this. The U.S. yield curve has now been inverted for more than 600 days. A recession is coming sooner rather than later. Okay, so what does that mean anyways? Well, I didn't know until recently either, but it's much easier to understand than it sounds. First, a little background. The yield curve is just a chart that measures Treasury bonds. Americans can buy bonds from the government at a specified price. After a specified period of time, they reach their maturity. People get paid back in full, plus the interest that was earned over that time period. Since these are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, these are typically considered safe investments. There are three main types of bonds: Treasury bonds, which have maturity rates of 20 to 30 years, T-bonds, which mature in 2 to 10 years, and T-bills, which mature in less than a year. Typically, the longer the maturity rate, the more interest you make. Since you're investing your money for a longer time, you get rewarded with higher interest, also called the yield. That's why it's called a yield curve. When the economy is going good, the chart will go upwards from left to right. Investors feel that investing their money long-term isn't the most lucrative option, and they can make even more money putting it somewhere else. To encourage people to buy these long-term bonds, interest rates for them go up. When following the chart to the right along the maturity axis, the interest rates become higher the longer you invest. This is a positive yield curve. When the economy begins to slow, more people will choose to put their money in what's considered a safe and long-term investment. Typically, those are the long-term Treasury bonds. It causes the right side of the chart to start to come down. It represents these long-term bond interest rates sinking. When this happens, people in finance say the yield curve is flattening. At a certain point, the curve will keep flattening until it starts to dip downwards. When you look at the chart from left to right, the line will be slanted down. This is called an inverted yield curve. In simple terms, it means investors see a recession on the rise and see Treasury bonds as the safest place for their money. With so many people wanting these long-term bonds, the Federal Reserve lowers the interest rate. This is what we're at now, and we're entering the scary part. When it's inverted, it means the long-term Treasury bonds has a lower interest rate than short-term Treasury bonds. That's a paradox in the market. What happens is investors feel the economy is going to slow even more or head into a recession. Instead of putting their money into riskier investments, more and more of them opt for a long-term Treasury bond to try and keep their money safe. With demand for these bonds super high, the Federal Reserve can lower the interest rates they pay out on these. Right now, we're in that spot. The yield curve is inverted, meaning a 10-year bond has a lower interest rate than a 2-year bond. So what causes this yield curve to invert in the first place? Well, there are three major factors. First, inflation. Just a few years ago, inflation hit a 40-year high. We're all seeing that play out at the grocery store. Second, budget deficits. The federal budget just this year ran a deficit of more than $850 billion. Keep in mind the U.S. hasn't passed a completed budget since 1997. Don't forget to throw in that America is nearly $35 trillion in debt. In fact, in just 3 years, annual interest payments on our debt have nearly doubled to more than $1 trillion. That would make someone like Dave Ramsey's head explode. Third, quantitative easing. That's just a $10 word for printing money, which is what happened during the pandemic. The U.S. sent out all those stimulus checks to Americans by printing more cash. In fact, 20% of all U.S. dollars ever printed were created in 2020. So we've committed all three of these sins in the last few years. And that's what gives us an inverted yield chart. These yield charts have long been used as an indicator on the health of the U.S. economy. Why? Well, since 1955, every economic recession has been preceded by an inverted yield curve, all 10 recessions. What other economic indicators are 100% accurate in predicting recessions? I can't think of one. In fact, if you go back a few decades earlier, it was inverted right before the Great Depression. Just in a millennial's lifetime, we've seen two major recessions, the dot-com bubble in 2000 and the Great Recession in 2008. Both of those were preceded, once again, by an inverted yield curve. And right now, this inverted yield curve is the worst on record. It's not only the steepest yield curve, it's also the longest one in U.S. history. The record was 624 days back in 1978, and we blew right past that. So what does this mean for you? Well, there's nothing an individual can do to stop a recession. However, if you know when it's coming, you can prepare. Knowing what is coming and being prepared will put you leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. Mark your calendar for July 25th through 27th. Ladies Love Politics will be attending the Bitcoin 2024 conference. Join me online as I cover the event, or grab a ticket and see for yourself the wonderful world of Bitcoin. Ladies Love Politics is a proud media partner of Bitcoin 2024. In the meantime, be sure to follow the Ladies Love Politics channel on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram.